Hello, welcome back. So previously we discussed about different techniques regarding the need finding and the data collection. Now in this in this video which we will discuss about, we will discuss something about the data gathering methods which are different from the ones which we have already gone through, and we'll focus on how to apply these need finding algorithms in our design challenges. So let's dive into this. We have already covered this slide. So far we have discussed some of the more common approaches that need finding. Depending on your domain though, there might be some other things you can do. For instance, if you are designing for a task for which interfaces already exist, you might start by critiquing the interfaces that already exist using some of the evaluation methods that we'll cover later in this course, of course. For example, if you are wanting to design a new system for ordering takeout food, you might evaluate the interfaces of calling in an order, ordering via mobile phone, or ordering via a website. Similarly, if you are trying to develop a tool to address a problem that people that are already addressing, you might go look at user reviews and see what people already like and dislike about existing products. For example, there are dozens of alarm clock apps out there and thousands of reviews. If you want to design a new one, you could start there to find out what people need or what their common complaints are. Third, if you are working on a task that already involves a lot of automatic logging, like web surfing, you could try to get some logs of user interaction that have already been generated. For example, say you wanted to build a browser that's better at anticipating what the user will want to open next. You could grab data logs and look for trends both within and across users. You can get creative with your data gathering methods. The goal is to use a variety of methods to paint a complete picture of the user's tasks. Now there are of course advantages and disadvantages to different methods which we have studied so far for the need finding. So in this week we have covered a wide variety of different methods for need finding. Each method had its own disadvantages and advantages. So let's start to wrap up this video by exploring this with an exercise. Here are the methods we have covered, and here are the potential advantages which need finding method actually has that advantage. Note that these might be somewhat relative, so your answer may differ from mine. The columns from left to right are naturalistic observation, participant observation, errors and hacks, interviews, surveys, focus groups, apprenticeship, and think aloud. The potential advantages are analyzes data that already exists, requires no recruitment, requires no synchronous participation, investigates the participant's thoughts, occurs within the task context, and cheaply gathers a lot of users' data. Now think about this and see that what advantages are associated with which of the need finding methods which we have covered so far. So here's my answer to this a very complicated exercise, which again can be different from yours depending on the reasons why you chose these particular advantages over the others. So two methods that analyze data that already exists are naturalistic observation and errors and hacks. Naturalistic observation doesn't necessarily analyze data that already exists, but it analyzes data that's being produced already on its own without observing it. So we don't have to go out and create an opportunity for data to happen. We just have to observe it and capture it where it's already taking place. Errors and hacks look at the way users already use interfaces to see what errors they regularly make or when they have to work around the interface. The two methods that require no recruitment are naturalistic observation and participant observation. In both cases, we don't need other human participants to come do anything differently based on the fact that we are doing some research. With interviews, surveys, focus groups, apprenticeship, and think aloud, we are always asking users to do something to accommodate us or to give us some data. And with errors and hacks, even if we can view that data on our own, we still need the user to give us permission to view their workspace or watch them do whatever they are doing. There might be some times when you can look for errors and hacks with naturalistic observation, but generally you need to get enough into the user's head to understand why something's an error or why they need to use a certain hack. For the most part, all of these are going to need some synchronous participation. There might be some exceptions. For example, we could do a retrospective analysis of errors and hacks, or we can have someone do a think aloud protocol where they actually write down their thoughts after doing a task. But generally speaking, the way most of these are usually done, they require synchronous participation. Surveys are the exception. Surveys we usually send out to someone, wait some period of time and get back the results. So we never have to interact live with any of our participants. That's one of the reasons why surveys can get a lot more data than other methods. Adding more participants doesn't necessarily require more of our time, at least not to gather the data in the first place. Analyzing it might require more time at the end, but that's not synchronous either. As far as investigating participant thoughts is concerned, almost all these methods can investigate this when used correctly. We could do a survey does not actually investigate participants' thoughts, but a well-designed survey is going to try get a heart out of the users' things or what they think about something. The only exception is naturalistic observation, where by definition we are just watching people, we are not interacting with them, or we are not asking them what they are thinking. It's always extremely valuable for us to be able to do some need finding that occurs within the task context itself. And unfortunately, interviews and surveys, which are some of our most common data gathering methods, very often don't occur within the task context. Naturalistic observation and participant observation obviously do, but since they don't involve getting inside the real user's head, their contributions are a little bit more limited. Apprenticeship and think aloud really capture the benefits of occurring within the task context, because either way, we get the user's thoughts while they are engaging with the task, or immediately thereafter. It is possible to do interviews and focus groups within the task context as well. It just isn't quite as common. Errors and hacks are certainly debatable as well, because the errors and hacks themselves definitely occur within the task context, but our analysis of them usually doesn't. And finally, as we talk about when we discuss cognitive task analysis, one of the challenges with need finding is the most of our approaches are extremely expensive. If we want to gather a lot of data cheaply, then we probably need to rely on surveys. Everything else is either going to incur a pretty significant cost, or it just isn't capable of gathering a lot of data. For example, we could cheaply be participant observations for weeks on end, but we are only ever going to gather data from one person, and that's never ideal. So let's see a design challenge. The need finding exercises that we have gone through so far focus on the needs of the exercisers. What can they do with their hands? What is the environment around them, like while exercising, and so on. However, that's only half the picture for this particular design. Our ultimate goal is to bring the experience of consuming books to people that exercise, which means we also need to understand the task of book reading on its own. Now, problem space is still around exercisers, so we wouldn't go through the entire design life cycle of book reading on its own. We don't need to design or prototype anything for them. But if we are going to bring the full book reading experience to people while exercising, we need to understand what that is. So take a moment and design an approach to need finding for people who are reading on their own. Now my suggestion is that we could apply pretty much every single need finding method that we have discussed to this task. We could, for example, go to the library and just watch people reading and see how they are taking notes. We have all likely done it ourselves. We can reflect on what we do while reading, although again, we need to be careful not to overvalue our own priorities and approaches. Reading is common enough that we can easily find participants for interviews, surveys, think alouds. The challenge here will be deciding who our users really are. Books are ubiquitous. Are we trying to cater to everyone who reads deliberately? If so, we need to sample a wide range of users, or initially we could choose a subset. We might cater to students who are studying or busy business people, or people that specifically walk or bike to work. We might start with one of those groups and then abstract out over time. We might eventually abstract all the way to just anyone who is unable to read and take notes with traditional way, like people driving cars or people with visual impairments. But that's further down the road. The more important thing is that we define who our user is, define the task in which we are interested, and deliberately design for that user and that task throughout the design lifecycle. Now that you have some understanding of the user's needs, it's time to try to formalize that into something we can use in design. There are a number of different ways we can do this. For example, maybe we create a step-by-step task outline of the user engaging in some task. We can break those tasks down into subtasks as well, all the way down to the operator level. We can further develop this kind of task outline into a hierarchical network, like we talked about before. This might involve more complexity than simply a linear series of actions. We might further augment this with a diagram of the structural relationships amongst the components in the system and how they interact. This might give us some information about how we get feedback back to the user or how they interact with our interface in the first place. From there, we might develop as even more into a flowchart equipped with decision-making points or points of interruptions. Notice how these representations are very similar to the outcomes of the task analysis and we talk about in the principles units of our conversations in our previous videos. So we can similarly use the data gathered from here to summarize a more comprehensive task analysis that will be useful in designing and prototyping our designs. Now finally, the final step for need finding is to define our requirements. They should be specific and evaluatable, and they can include some components that are outside of user's task as well as defined by the project requirements. These are the requirements that our final interface must meet. In terms of user tasks, we might have requirements for guarding functionality, what the interface can actually do. Usability, how certain user interactions must work. Learnability, how fast the user can start to use the interface. And accessibility, who can use the interface. We might also have some that are generated by external project requirements like compatibility, what devices the interface can run on. Compliance, how the interface protects user privacy. And cost, how much the final tool can actually cost, and so on. We'll use these to evaluate the interfaces we develop going forward. Now, how might you need finding work in your chosen area of HCI? If you are looking at designing for some technological innovation like augmented or virtual interactions, the initial phase might not actually be that different. Your goal is to understand how people perform tasks right now without your interface. So initially you want to observe them in their naturalistic environment. Later, though, you will need to start thinking about bringing participants to you to experience the devices firsthand. If you are interested in something like HCI for healthcare or education, you have a wealth of naturalistic observations available to you. You might even have existing interfaces doing what you want to do, and you can try to leverage those as part of your need finding exercises. Remember, no matter your area of application, you want to start with real users that might be observing them in the wild, talking to them directly, or looking at data they have already generated. So to conclude this set of videos, we have talked about need finding. Need finding is how you develop your understanding of the needs of your user. What tasks are they completing? What is the context of those tasks? What else is going on? What are they thinking during the task? and what did they have to hold in working memory. All these things feed into your understanding of your user's needs. We have discussed a number of different techniques to approach this, ranging from low intervention to high intervention. On the low side, we can just observe our users in the wild, or we can become users ourselves and participate in the task. Working up, when you try to look at more closely at user areas to find errors or hacks, or pre-use the data that they are already generating. We might interact with them directly through surveys, interviews, or focus groups, or we might choose to work alongside them, not just participating in the task independently, but learning from them and developing expertise itself. Once you have gained efficient understanding, it's time to move on to the next step, brainstorming design alternatives. So as you know, this is most probably the next week will be the last week, so I will try to upload the video for design alternatives. Till then, if you have any questions related to the need finding algorithms, please let me know in the comment section, or you can just ask the questions in Google Classroom, or you can discuss it with me when we have the live session. So till the next videos, thank you and goodbye.